Emma gave a triumphant smile, thinking she was winning, unaware that her actions would eventually lead to disaster. My name is Sally, I'm 32 years old, and I work as a seamstress at a TV and film studio, fixing costumes. The costumes range from fancy period pieces to modern clothes used in current shows. My job involves adjusting designs to fit both the era and the actors, as well as repairing any damage from filming. I mostly work with sewing machines and irons, and although my main job is fixing clothes, I can also make garments from scratch, a skill I learned by watching my mom when I was young. I love my work, even if the hours are unpredictable and the demands high. I hope to keep working here for the rest of my career. I met my husband, Joe, at the studio, where he worked taking care of the actors. Joe is 3 years older than me, and since we saw each other every day, we gradually grew closer. 2 years after meeting, despite our busy schedules, we got married. Just as we started our new life together, my mother fell ill and passed away, so we had to delay our wedding plans. We'd originally planned a small ceremony at a local church with only family, but after postponing it, we decided to save for a bigger wedding and honeymoon. Since our work hours were so irregular, we decided it would be wasteful to rent a place just to sleep. Instead, we moved in with Joe's mother, Emma, to save money for our wedding and honeymoon. I had lost my father early on, and Joe had lost his father too, so he was concerned about leaving his mom alone. I wanted to get along with Emma, but looking back, that's when my troubles began. Emma didn't seem interested in getting along with me. To her, I was like a thief who had taken her son away. Once we moved in, the harassment began. If I cleaned, she would nitpick. Sally, this place is filthy, over here, and over there, too. I wonder what kind of upbringing you had. Your parents must have been something else. I put up with it, cleaning so much that my hands became sore and cracked. Emma was unbelievably strict about chores, from cleaning to laundry to cooking. No matter how exhausted I was, if she found any small flaw, she'd make me redo everything with a calm, cruel expression. The more worn out I became, the harsher her criticisms grew. I remember scrubbing the sink all night, feeling that nothing I did would ever satisfy her. Over time, Emma insisted I handle all the housework alone, and it became too much to balance with my job. Eventually, I arranged to work from home, hoping this would make things easier, but it only made her demands worse. Every day felt like being Cinderella, constantly busy with housework. Is the laundry done? The upstairs curtain has a tear, fix it. Since you're good at sewing, right? She'd say. I'm sorry, Emma, I have urgent work, could I fix it on the weekend? I'd reply. What are you saying? The neighbors could see it like that. Fix it now. I found myself working while doing housework or doing chores while working, sometimes staying up all night to keep up. The work never seemed to end, and Emma seemed to take pleasure in watching me wear myself out. Our relationship became that of a mistress and a maid. I did everything around the house while she continued to demand more. I had too much pride to easily share my struggles with Joe. I tried my best to keep up with my duties, but the real challenge wasn't just the physical exhaustion, it was the mental strain that wore me down. Sometimes, Emma would invite the neighbors over for lunch, which felt like a nightmare. She'd criticize me even more harshly in front of them, and I'd overhear her saying things like, "She's such a terrible daughter-in-law. I have to teach her every day. My son may be blind to it, but I'm not. She's just so rude and lacks any common sense." The neighbors would laugh and agree, and I'd think to myself, who's really the one lacking common sense? I could handle chores, but the hurtful words stayed with me, and I felt like I was reaching my breaking point. If things went on like this, I worried I might lose my mind. As if Emma's behavior wasn't enough, Joe's older sister, Sarah, made things worse. She's 38 and lives nearby with her boyfriend. To be honest, the best way to describe Sarah is stingy. She'd often show up for lunch unannounced, likely to save money. Since she didn't warn me, I couldn't prepare her portion ahead of time, so she'd just eat whatever I had made and then leave. Sarah acted like everything in the house was hers. She'd take whatever she wanted without asking. "Oh, perfect. I'm out of tissues. I'll take these," she'd say, even if I'd just bought them for Emma. If I tried to say something, like, "But Sarah, I bought those for Emma," she'd glare at me and say, "You're always home, aren't you? Just go buy more." Sarah was just like her mother, and I couldn't understand how Joe had turned out so different. The biggest problem was when Sarah took ingredients for dinner without asking. Each time, I'd have to stop everything and go shopping again. One day, I'd had enough. I asked, "Sarah, could you please tell me before you take something?" Later, she told Emma, twisting my words, Emma confronted me, saying, "Did you tell Sarah not to come over anymore?" "No, I didn't say that," I replied, but Emma just shot back, "So you're calling Sarah a liar?" Stuck between Sarah's lies and Emma's cruelty, I felt completely trapped. Dealing with Emma alone was hard enough, but together, they made life unbearable. One day, as I passed by their room, I overheard them talking. Sarah said loudly, "It's like having a free maid. How nice. I wish I could have one at my house too." Hearing myself referred to as a maid stung deeply. I already felt like one, but having it said out loud was unbearable. Something inside me snapped. That night, I finally opened up to Joe. "I can't do this anymore. I've been patient, but I can't live with Emma any longer. Please, let's move out." After a moment, Joe agreed. "We've saved enough. Let's move out soon." "Really?" I said, feeling tears of relief. "I'll start looking for a place right away." Little did we know, Emma had overheard our conversation, and this would lead to her strange behavior later on. From that day, my life felt brighter. I had one big dream. I wanted to wear a wedding dress I'd made myself, especially since sewing was my passion. I shared this with Joe, and feeling motivated, I ordered fabric online and started working on the dress in secret. It gave me something positive to focus on. One day, Sarah dropped by unexpectedly and saw me sewing the dress. "Oh wow, a wedding dress. It must be nice to have your own dress," she said. Then she added, "Hey, Sally, I'm getting married in 2 months. Make my dress too, would you?" "Really?" I replied, a bit taken aback. "Yeah, renting is such a waste of money. I want to keep costs down for my wedding, so please help me out." This was typical Sarah, always trying to save money. I hesitated, but eventually agreed to make her dress since she would cover the cost of the materials. Since our wedding was still a while away, I decided to focus on Sarah's dress first. "Keep this a secret from Mom," Sarah told me. It turned out Sarah planned to tell Emma she was renting the dress, hoping Emma would give her money to cover the rental fee, whatever she paid me for materials. She was set on getting back. Her stinginess was almost impressive. I even mentioned this to Joe, who said, "Once my sister decides on something, she won't back down." "I'm sorry, but it'd really help if you could make the dress for her." I didn't mind too much. Feeling positive, I smiled and said, "Leave it to me, I'll do my best." I saw it as good practice for making my own dress and a way to improve my relationship with Sarah. I dove into the dressmaking process, working on it between house chores and my main job. Emma must have noticed, as she would sometimes peek into my room to see what I was doing. With Sarah's wedding approaching fast, I was nearly done with the dress. Then one day, Emma came into my room with an unusual, cheerful smile. "You're working hard today, aren't you? Aren't you tired?" she asked. "Yes, a bit," I replied, feeling a little uneasy at her sudden friendliness. "I'll make us some coffee. Why don't you take a break?" she offered. "Really? That would be wonderful. Thank you," I said, surprised. Emma left, humming, but something felt off. Emma making coffee for me? That was unusual, but I brushed the feeling aside and went back to work, adding the final touches of lace. Despite it being Sarah's dress, I was putting real care into it. A while later, I smelled coffee and heard Emma knock at the door. "Sally, may I come in?" "Yes," I said, looking up. Emma entered, carrying a tray filled with cups and saucers, enough for a full party. Her arms trembled as she brought the heavy tray closer. Suddenly, she pretended to trip, and in an instant, cups and saucers went crashing, with coffee spilling everywhere. For a moment, I was stunned. My nearly finished dress was now splattered with coffee stains, like a giraffe pattern on the yellow fabric. I gasped, horrified. Emma flashed a brief smile, before putting on a concerned face. "Oh no, I'm so sorry, it was an accident. Are you hurt? Wait, is that a dress? I thought you were working on old fabric scraps." I stood there, frozen in shock. Then Emma, pretending to be sympathetic, said, "Oh dear, you can't have a wedding with a dress like this, can you?" My suspicions were confirmed. Emma wanted to ruin my dress, knowing it would ruin our wedding plans and delay our move. Swallowing my anger, I rushed to the bathroom, trying to rinse out the coffee stains before they set. Emma followed, watching me struggle with a malicious grin. "Need any help?" she asked. "No, I'm fine," I replied coldly, fighting a mix of anger and panic. Just then, Sarah appeared behind Emma and asked, "What's going on? Are you bullying Sally again?" Emma, trying to look innocent, replied, "Oh, I just accidentally spilled coffee on her dress." Sarah's eyes widened. What? That's my dress. What am I supposed to do? My wedding is in 2 weeks. Emma was stunned. Yours? I thought, wait, why didn't you tell me she was making your dress? As the two of them argued, I kept rinsing the dress, ignoring their ridiculous exchange. After all, I'd spent months working on this dress for my sister-in-law, and I wasn't going to give up on it now. As I washed the dress, I thought back over everything that had happened. I hadn't told anyone that I was making the dress for Sarah, so Emma must have thought it was mine. If she had known it was for her own daughter, she probably wouldn't have tried to ruin it. To Emma, I was always just a thief who had stolen her beloved son. She couldn't stand the thought of someone she viewed as merely a maid taking Joe away from her. She must have thought that if she sabotaged our wedding, Joe would stay. Her bitterness had driven her to this absurd plan. Sarah, meanwhile, was furious, shouting at Emma, "How could you do this? Everything is ruined. I can't believe my own mother would destroy my wedding." Emma stammered, "I'm sorry, Sarah, I didn't know it was your dress. I wouldn't have done it if I'd known." But it was clear she meant what she'd done. Then, a voice interrupted, calm yet firm, "So you thought it was Sally's dress and ruined it on purpose?" We all turned. Joe was standing there, looking at us with a mix of sadness and disappointment. "Oh, Joe, when did you get here?" Emma tried to cover her shock. Joe shook his head. "I've been watching. I saw everything. You knew Sally was working hard on that dress, and you still ruined it. That's just cruel." "Joe, it's not like that." "I didn't mean," Emma tried to explain. "Don't make excuses," Joe snapped. Emma fell silent. She seemed completely stunned, probably never expecting her son, whom she adored, to speak to her that way. Joe continued, his voice steady but filled with sadness. "Sally's been patient all this time, for my sake, hoping things would get better with you. She's endured everything, because you're my mother." I felt my eyes fill with tears. I had often thought Joe was too soft, too reluctant to stand up to her, but in that moment, I saw his strength and loyalty, and I loved him even more. Joe turned back to Emma, saying firmly, "This can't go on. Sally and I are moving out as soon as possible. We plan to stay until the wedding out of respect for you, but I won't ask Sally to stay here anymore. If this keeps going, who knows what might happen next." Emma looked up, horrified. "Danger? I would never put her in danger." "How can you say that?" Joe replied, his voice full of quiet anger. "You ruined months of her work without a second thought. It could have been worse." Joe's face was an expression I had never seen before, sadness mixed with anger and deep disappointment. Emma, usually quick to lash out, was left speechless, with tears streaming down her face. Even Sarah, normally defensive, stood stunned, glancing between Joe and their mother. After this, everything changed. Sarah had to cancel her wedding due to the damage and loss of the dress, and since it was so close to the date, none of the money was refunded. Emma had paid for most of it, so Sarah didn't lose any money herself, but she was furious at her mother. The sudden cancellation also angered her fiancé and his family, leading to a breakup shortly afterward. For all that followed, Sarah continually blamed Emma, and Emma seemed to finally regret the consequences of her thoughtless harassment. The shock of Joe's words had clearly affected her, leaving her much quieter. After Joe and I moved out, Emma occasionally contacted us, but only to ask for money. One reason Emma didn't want us to leave was financial. While we lived together, we helped cover household expenses, and Emma relied on our support since her only income was her pension. But each time she called asking for money after we left, Joe stood firm. "Mom, you should look for a job," he'd say. "There are plenty of options, and it's important for all of us to be independent. Please, let us live our lives." Emma would beg him not to abandon her, but Joe remained resolute, feeling that it was necessary for our well-being. Eventually, Emma found work as a janitor. In an ironic twist, her strictness about cleaning fit the job perfectly. Sarah, after breaking up with her boyfriend, ended up moving back in with Emma. She stopped working altogether and began relying on Emma's pension and part-time earnings. When I saw her once, she was almost unrecognizable. She had gained a lot of weight and looked very different. As for Joe and me, we moved into a cozy apartment and are finally enjoying a happy, peaceful life. There's no one to criticize or make sarcastic comments here. Life now feels blissfully calm compared to the tension we lived with in that dysfunctional household. We've even set a date for our wedding. It'll be a small ceremony, just with close friends and colleagues. We chose not to invite Emma and Sarah. We didn't want any disruptions, especially given the difficult place they're in right now, but in the end, they brought this upon themselves. I've also started working on a new wedding dress. This one is going to be even more beautiful than the one that Emma ruined.